Hello, and welcome back to the fourth episode of In Case You Missed It, bringing you the biggest stories from Richmond, Washington, and from around the world. This week, we'll be talking about the New Hampshire primary and the ongoing Virginia state legislative session. My name is Tyler Bagent, and let's get started. This week, New Hampshire went to the polls in the second contest of the presidential election, with both Republicans and Democrats voting to elect their respective nominee. For the Republicans, with over 95% of the vote reporting, former President Donald Trump has been projected as the winner by the Associated Press, strengthening his frontrunner status in the race for the nomination. The race was seen as a must-win for former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley in her quest to defeat Trump for the Republican presidential nomination. On Sunday, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis suspended his campaign and endorsed Trump, making the nominating contest officially a two-person race. New Hampshire was largely seen as a more friendly territory for Haley, as there are fewer born-again Christians in New Hampshire and more independents that would be voting in the Republican primary for a number of reasons, though many Haley voters named their opposition for Donald Trump as their motivation from going to the polls. Despite her loss, Haley has vowed to remain in the race, shifting the focus of her campaign towards the South Carolina primary on February 24th. While this is her home state, she faces an uphill battle against the former president, as mentioned last week. She currently trails by almost 30 points. That said, South Carolina is also an open primary state, so Haley could potentially turn out enough independent voters to make it a race. However, Trump does remain the very clear frontrunner. On the Democratic side, President Joe Biden won the Democratic primary in a landslide, despite not even being on the ballot. Last week, I discussed the quirks with the New Hampshire Democratic primary. How President Biden did not file for the ballot following New Hampshire defying a National Democratic Party rule that moved their primary later in the cycle. State law declares that their presidential primary should be first in the nation, and the Republican-held government in New Hampshire was unwilling to change it. Therefore, the primary held this week in New Hampshire did not actually allocate any delegates or votes in the presidential primary, and the National Democratic Party called this primary, quote, meaningless. The Biden write-in effort was not sanctioned by the Biden-Harris campaign, instead being promoted and endorsed by various New Hampshire elected officials and supporters of Biden in the state. The Democratic primary will officially kick off on February 3rd, when South Carolina will go to the polls. President Biden will be on the ballot for this race. On January 10th, the Virginia State Legislature officially swore into the 2024 legislative session, set to go for 60 days and to pass legislation relating to a number of different important issues. Democrats hold majorities in both chambers, setting up potential conflict with Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin. Youngkin laid out his vision for the second half of his term in the State of the Commonwealth address on the 10th. Here's a clip from his speech, courtesy of the National Governors Association.
And if we want to be on this road where more people call Virginia home, then we can come around the table to lower the cost of living for all Virginians. We can raise the ceiling and the floor in education, foster safe communities, and protect our constitutional freedoms. We can empower people to not just choose life, but to choose to build their life, their future, here in Virginia. If we want Virginia to unleash opportunity, the second half starts now.
Furthermore, Democratic delegate Don Scott of Portsmouth made history as he was elected as the first ever black Speaker of the State House. His election also marks the first time in Virginia history that both chambers of the state legislature, the House of Delegates and the state Senate, have been led by people of color. Scott leads the House as Speaker, and the Senate is led by Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears and Democratic President pro tempore Louise Lucas. The legislature will tackle a number of different issues throughout this session, though some have been particularly on the minds of voters and legislators alike. Democrats have introduced a bill to continue the increases to minimum wage, including an increase to $13.50 an hour in 2025 and $15 an hour in 2026. When the General Assembly originally raised the minimum wage to $12 an hour in 2020, they plan to review the increases, including the $15 an hour in 2026, in this year's session. That said, this planned increase must go to the desk of Governor Youngkin if passed by the legislature, who has indicated that he will likely veto the measure if it reaches him. Furthermore, the Youngkin administration and legislative Democrats are likely to clash on a plan to move the NBA's Washington Wizards and NHL's Washington Capitals to the Alexandria area. Governor Youngkin unveiled the plan in December, asking the legislature for around $2 billion in bonds to build an entertainment district in Alexandria, which has received pushback from both Alexandria residents and state legislatures. Louise Lucas, the aforementioned president pro tempore, released a statement on the social media platform X saying, quote, "Anyone who thinks I'm going to approve an arena in Northern Virginia using state tax dollars before we deliver on toll relief in 4 public schools in Hampton Roads must think I have dumbass written on my forehead." In news particularly impacting college students, State Senator Danica Roem introduced the Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program bill, which seeks to address food insecurity at Virginia's public colleges and universities by creating a program in which, if a university qualifies and then opts into the program, would receive grants to support on-campus efforts and initiatives to eliminate student food insecurity. While the bill has not passed as of yet, it has received bipartisan support from the Higher Education Subcommittee, meaning it could pass before the end of the session. The Rotunda will continue to monitor all developments throughout the session. Thank you for watching. I am Tyler Bagent, and this was In Case You Missed It. Check back next time for more updates from Richmond, Washington, and from around the world. See you soon.